The rich do not work for money. This seemingly paradoxical statement is the starting point for a journey that has changed how millions of people view money. The book known as Rich Dad, Poor Dad does not merely tell the story of two fathers with two contrasting lifestyles. It is also a mirror that compels readers to ask themselves, have the things we believed since childhood studying hard, finding a secure job, saving up to buy a house been a sweet trap locking us into an endless cycle? The story begins in the childhood of a boy who had two fathers, one highly educated, deeply believing in the value of degrees, stability, and thrift, the other less educated but rich in practical experience, seeing money as a tool that could be controlled. From this clash, the entire journey becomes a series of vivid financial experiments, trying a small business, being disappointed with meager wages, confronting the fear of loss, and then gradually realizing the naked truth that income does not determine wealth, but rather how we understand and manage the flow of money. The unique aspect of this book is not in providing a formula for getting rich. It does not promise a bed of roses or offer ready-made investment instructions for people to simply follow. What it does is force everyone to confront their own mindset. Why, after so many years of schooling and so many hours of labor, do many people still live in financial worry? Why are high-income earners still stuck in debt, while a select few with humble beginnings achieve freedom? The lesson on assets and liabilities is presented like a knife cutting through illusions. A large house is not necessarily an asset if it only drains money from your pocket. A high-paying job does not guarantee wealth if that income only flows into expenses and debt. Conversely, a small income-generating asset is the seed of freedom. This paradox causes many people to waver, but it is also what opens up a different perspective. At the same time, the book also points out a truth few want to admit. Emotion guides the majority of people, and the fear of scarcity and the desire for more are the two forces that control their life cycle. When afraid, they rush to find a secure job. When desirous, they spend to compensate. Both forces combine to tighten the rat race cycle. Only by learning to look straight at emotions, identifying and controlling them, can people escape. Placed in this context, this book becomes an invitation. It is not an invitation to get rich through tricks, but an invitation to bravely break the mold. It provokes a simple, but hard-to-avoid question. Will what we believe about money truly lead to freedom or only make us more dependent? Listeners coming to this story will perhaps also bring their own different experiences, stacking bills, exhausting work hours, or dreams of a less dependent life. The important thing is not to agree absolutely with every argument, but to dare to let these ideas touch them, to reassess the assumptions that were once considered self-evident. Ultimately, this book is a mirror for everyone to look into. Each of us is following one of those fathers, one ideology, one belief about money. The question is, which path are we repeating? And do we have enough courage to choose a different one? And before we get into the book review, we encourage listeners to buy and read it to fully appreciate the content. Only when you finish reading this book will you understand the issues you are hearing me talk about. Please buy the book and support the author. And now, let's start reviewing the book together. A child had two fathers yet truly had no single path to follow. One was highly educated, with degrees piled high, believing in the power of studying and a prestigious diploma. The other dropped out of school early, but had an unusual ability, the capacity to see money, not as something to chase after, but as a tool to control. This very contrast filled childhood with unanswered questions. When the kids in the neighborhood boasted about their parents' new car, weekend beach trips, or imposing houses with large yards, the boy and his best friend stood on the periphery, feeling excluded from the game, a feeling that was both hurtful and igniting a spark. That comparison initiated the search for the secret, how to get rich. They tried something the adults had never thought of. The two boys gathered every discarded toothpaste tube, stacking them in the backyard. They painstakingly melted down the leftover lead fragments, pouring them into plaster molds to cast crude coins. To them, it was a mint, a small manufacturing company no one expected. The pride of creation was quickly extinguished when the father discovered it, and was forced to explain that what they were doing had a very dangerous name: counterfeiting. Disappointed, the fire in them dimmed somewhat, but a different spark rose from it. The initial failure was actually a great lesson. If they wanted to be rich, they had to learn how to operate money, not look for shortcuts. The rich father, a busy entrepreneur, saw a rare desire in the eyes of the two children, and he accepted the challenge of teaching them, but in a different way, not through theory, not through lectures, but through direct, even harsh. Experience. Their first job was just dusting the cans of goods in the grocery store. 3 hours a week in exchange for 10 cents an hour, a salary so low it was ridiculous. But hidden beneath it was a deliberate arrangement. After a few weeks, the initial excitement turned into frustration. The meager money was not enough to buy even a few comic books, while the football games in the park were still going on and they couldn't join, accumulating resentment. And then, when one was about to quit, the rich father finally revealed himself. He didn't say much, just patiently observed until they were annoyed. When both were ready to strike, he just smiled and explained that life does not lecture with words, but with silent nudges. If they only knew how to complain about low wages, they would be no different from the millions of people out there, letting life control them, instead of learning to read the lesson from those nudges. The rich father pointed to the angry eyes of the child and said that this feeling was the real starting point of learning, because only when the dissatisfaction is big enough do people have the desire to change. And from there, he offered the first truth: the poor and the middle class work for money, while the rich have money work for them. On another morning, he continued to challenge the two children with a bargaining game. Initially, he suggested raising the salary to 25 cents, then $1, then $5. Each time their hearts beat faster, their desire flaring up. But at a certain threshold, they suddenly realized that if they kept chasing higher wages, they would only be a donkey chasing a carrot dangling in front of them. Desire and fear are the traps that lock people in an endless cycle. The rich father did not teach them to run away from emotions, but to recognize them. The fear of not having enough money, the desire to have more. Both are motivations, but if they are allowed to lead, people will become slaves. That lesson was deeply imprinted like a knife etching into the blank paper of childhood. Freedom does not come from money, but from escaping the control of fear and greed. From there, a new door opened. It was no longer about a few pennies, no longer about comparing with rich friends, but a journey of learning to see money through a different lens, a flow that can be directed, a tool that can be molded instead of an invisible master ruling life. When they agreed to continue working without receiving any money, the two children felt tricked. But it was at that very moment that the door to a new lesson opened. The rich father did not need long lectures. He just needed to create a situation where they tasted the truth, working without meaning, living in anger and injustice, and then seeing how they would react. After a few weeks of dusting in the small supermarket without getting a cent, the feeling of resentment mounted. Why endure this? Why sacrifice lively football games just for tired hands? The answer did not come immediately, but only appeared when he led both of them outside. Sitting under the shade of a tree, watching the busy flow of people, he asked, "Do you see anything?" They looked around, hurried workers leaving their shifts, a few men sitting having beer to relax, old faces darkened by years of employment. The rich father spoke slowly. That is the future of most people. They work hard, get paid, pay bills, and then continue the loop. People call that stability, but in fact, that is the rat race trap with no end. That truth is harsh. The poor and middle class are always controlled by two invisible forces, fear and desire. The fear of not having money compels them to work, while desire makes them spend to feel like they are living a more meaningful life. When expenses exceed income, their fear grows even more. And to cope with that fear, they continue to work harder, hoping for a higher salary. But as the salary increases, desire also swells. A new car, a bigger house, more luxurious vacations. The cycle repeats, tightening gradually like a noose. The rich father never denied the power of emotion. He acknowledged that every human has emotions. The problem is not to eliminate them, but to learn how to observe them. If they let fear and desire make decisions instead of reason, their whole lives will be spent chasing illusions. On another occasion, he challenged the two boys by suggesting a pay raise. As the number grew, their eyes lit up. That exhilarating feeling in their chests was the evidence. Even when clearly aware of the game, people are easily swept away. But when the amount of money he offered became too absurd, a spark flashed in their minds. They realized they were being lured like a donkey chasing a carrot. And in that very moment, they understood that every salary is just a sweet trap. As long as they believed that money can soothe their insecurity, the next lesson was silence. The rich father did not rush to explain. He let the children wrestle with their emotions themselves. As the silence lengthened, they began to turn back to the bigger question: so what must be done to avoid the trap? He pointed to their heads and said, "The answer lies here. The most powerful thing is not money, but the mind that knows how to see through the money game. He recounted that many adults with high incomes are still broke. They believe more money will solve the problem, but the more money they have, the greater the anxiety. The poor fear scarcity, the rich fear loss. Both are chained, differing only in the thickness of the chain. True freedom only comes when people understand how money works and learn to turn it into a tool, instead of a master. In his view, the fear of losing their job is the reason millions of people blindly work every day. They console themselves with safety, insurance, and welfare benefits. But all of this is just a fragile shell. With one disruption, everything collapses, and they find themselves standing at the edge of the abyss again. Meanwhile, those who dare to look directly at fear and learn to manage it will find freedom, not because they have more money, but because they do not let fear control their lives. The child at the time did not fully understand, but a seed had been sown. He began to realize that working blindly for a wage was no different from willingly entering a treadmill. The rebellion in his soul turned into determination. He had to find another way. The poor and middle class let emotions guide them, while the rich let reason lead the way. That is a fine line, but it determines the entire fate. And to cross that line requires a rare kind of courage, the courage to question the things that seem self-evident. From then on, the two children began to see the world differently. No longer did they just see the meager salary, but the subtle trap behind it. No longer did they just look at the items their friends boasted about, but the invisible burden dragging their parents along. And in those naive eyes, a different perspective emerged, the prospect of a life where money no longer holds power. After the lesson about fear and desire was gradually etched in their minds, a new door opened. That was when the concepts of assets and liabilities appeared, a boundary that seemed simple, but determined who was rich and who was poor. Many people believe their house is their most valuable asset. They work hard, pay mortgage debt for decades, and tell themselves they are investing. But in reality, that house constantly drains money from their pocket: loan interest, repair costs, property taxes, maintenance. The cash flow flows out incessantly. In contrast, a small rented apartment is considered an asset because it consistently puts money in. The definition is concise. An asset is something that puts money in your pocket, and a liability is something that takes money out of your pocket. No complex formula is needed. Just that one sentence is enough to clarify the difference that most people overlook. And that oversight creates a common tragedy. People work hard all their lives, but still cannot escape poverty, because they think they are building assets when they are actually cultivating massive liabilities. This is also the reason why many highly educated, high-salaried people are financially precarious. As their income increases, they buy bigger houses, fancier cars, and spend more, and expenses increase faster than the salary hike. And thus, the cycle never stops. Wealth is not measured by salary, but by the number of cash-flowing assets. An example mentioned is well-trained professionals like doctors, lawyers, and engineers. They leave school with solid specialized knowledge, starting their careers with high incomes. But at the same time, they carry large student loans, continue to borrow to buy houses, and borrow to buy cars. These achievements swallow most of their income, leaving persistent worry. School teaches them how to earn money, but not how to keep it or make it multiply. This deficit is not limited to the individual, but is passed down through generations. Parents teach their children that the path to success is to study well, find a high-paying job, and then buy a house and a car. The child grows up continuing that cycle, carrying an invisible inheritance, a false belief about money. The result is that the entire family, across multiple generations, remains trapped in the same pattern. Amidst this context, another principle is put forth. Don't ask how to afford the desired item, but ask if it puts money in your pocket or takes money out. This seemingly dry question is actually a compass that helps distinguish between investing and consuming. This approach transforms the view of the world. Instead of considering a house the greatest asset of a lifetime, one needs to realize it is only a liability unless it generates cash flow. Instead of viewing a new car as a symbol of success, one needs to realize it is a door opening to endless expenses. What is called security is sometimes just a sugar-coated trap. The asset-liability lesson is not meant to encourage an austere lifestyle or deny material pleasures, but to open one's eyes to the truth. If you cannot distinguish, no matter how much money you earn, you cannot escape the treadmill. Conversely, by accumulating small but genuine assets, time will become an ally. With this simple yet sharp definition, The asset column and the liability column are established in every person's mind. One side is cash flow in, the other is cash flow out. The only remaining question is, which column are we adding to every day? The analysis of assets and liabilities makes the real picture clearer. Quite a few intelligent, highly educated people fall into debt because they confuse external appearance with actual value. High income makes them easily confident that they are moving forward. But behind the facade of prosperity is an invisible burden. A newly graduated doctor with a desirable salary immediately buys a spacious house and a new car. Almost the entire monthly income is used to repay loans, bills, maintenance costs, taxes, all become a burden. Despite the high income, the actual cash flow is negative. Soon, that person feels trapped. That is the common paradox: large income, but limited freedom. At that moment, a principle is stated: do not just focus on working for a wage, attend to your own business. Most people spend their lives enriching others. When working for a company, they generate profit for the owner. When depositing money in the bank, they help the bank lend and generate returns. When consuming, they sustain manufacturing corporations. Very few people truly dedicate effort to building their personal asset column. The concept of attending to your own business does not mean quitting a job, but, in parallel with a daily job, focusing on building an asset stream. This can start with small investments, simple real estate, or small shareholdings. The initial size is not important. The direction is. The key lies in the cash flow being directed toward oneself, not just flowing out. Along with that, another truth is exposed: the tax system. Initially, taxes were introduced as a tool targeting the rich, but over time, the burden primarily falls on the middle class, those with stable and easily controlled incomes. Their wages are taxed before they even receive them. Meanwhile, the rich, thanks to companies and legal structures, have the ability to spend and reinvest before they have to pay taxes. The poor and middle class regard taxes as an unchangeable obligation. The rich regard taxes as a game rule to be learned and utilized. The difference lies in perception. The corporation becomes a shield that allows for legally minimizing taxes, while simultaneously protecting personal assets. Deductions, legitimate expenses, reinvestment all are tools the rich skillfully employ. This power does not come from evasion, but from understanding the law. Laws exist to be learned and leveraged, but not everyone reads and even fewer apply. As a result, the majority accepts paying a larger share, while the minority utilizes the system to expand their advantage. Those who understand the law benefit. Those who ignore it bear the burden. Observing this, the two boys realized that school did not prepare them for reality. High grades might open career opportunities, but they did not teach how to manage cash flow or how to protect income from being eroded. This explains why the poor father's excellent friends with stellar degrees were still constantly worried about bills, while the rich father, with modest education, built financial stability. Working for a wage may bring income, but only building assets brings freedom. This truth became increasingly clear. It is not a call to quit immediately, but a reminder to do both: work for a living while building for liberation. With this lesson, a novel concept was deeply ingrained: to escape the endless cycle, one cannot rely solely on hard work. Financial intelligence is needed, the rules of the game must be understood, and one must diligently cultivate their own asset column. The story of taxes and corporations is just one part of a broader picture. When tax laws were first introduced, many believed they would be a tool to redistribute wealth, taking from the rich to share with society, but reality unfolded quite differently over time. The burden fell onto the shoulders of the middle class, those with stable incomes from wages, who are easily controlled and have few means of avoidance. Meanwhile, the rich saw an opportunity. They established corporations, turning the company into an armor protecting their assets. Legally, the company is a separate entity with the right to incur expenses before calculating taxable income. This creates a powerful reversal. Employees receive a salary, pay tax, and then spend. Those with the company spend first, pay tax later. That difference is enough to create a huge gap over time. Upon close observation, the asymmetry is clear. A wage earner has tax deducted immediately. The remainder is used for spending. Conversely, an entrepreneur with a company can legally record expenses such as office rent, travel, and even business meetings. All those expenses are deducted before tax is calculated. Those who know how to utilize the law will turn it into leverage. while those who do not will forever be burdened. The difference is not in ethics, but in knowledge. Laws exist, opening up opportunities for those patient enough to read, understand, and apply them. The majority ignores them, accepts paying a larger share, and comforts themselves that it is fate. But in silence, a small group uses that very law to pull ahead. From here, a new lesson emerges. Money does not only come from working for a wage or saving. The rich invent money not by creating counterfeit currency, but by seeing opportunity where others only see deadlock. When the market fluctuates, most people are afraid, sitting still and waiting. But in that chaos, the rich find a loophole, a piece of abandoned land, a struggling small business, a new trend no one yet believes in. All can become opportunities. The deciding factor is not luck, but preparation and shrewdness. Opportunity is always present, but only reveals itself to those with trained eyes. And to have those eyes, knowledge, experience, and the courage to face risk are needed. Most people fear making mistakes, fear losing money, so they choose safety. But it is that very safety that makes them miss major turning points. The rich father explained that the ability to invent money comes from combining financial intelligence with creativity. Financial intelligence allows us to understand cash flow, to know what is an asset and what is a liability. Creativity helps us find new, different ways when the majority is still following the beaten path. This combination creates a superior advantage, seeing value where others only see risk. A typical example, when banks liquidate assets, most people avoid them, thinking they are leftover goods. But those who know how to perceive will realize the opportunity to buy low, renovate, and create a new cash flow. Or when the stock market crashes, the panic crowd sells off while the steadfast buy in, only to benefit when the market recovers. Money does not generate itself. It is created from vision and action. The lesson does not stop there. Inventing money also means creating new models, a new product, a differentiated service, a unique business idea. All can be transformed into cash flow if executed. Creativity, which is often considered a luxury, is actually the foundation of wealth. But creativity cannot stand alone. It needs to be nurtured by discipline and knowledge. Creativity without understanding cash flow only leads to risk. Understanding cash flow without creativity only stagnates. Combining both can create true wealth. At this point, another distinct principle has been affirmed. The poor wait for luck. The rich create opportunity. The poor believe that money comes from salary. The rich understand that money comes from intelligence and shrewdness. When the story of creativity in finance is revealed, another perspective gradually becomes clear. Most people only see money as a finite flow, working, getting paid, spending, and then continuing. They believe that money can only come from labor effort or career advancement. But for those called rich, money is no longer a product of work, but a product of mindset. The rich do not wait for opportunity to knock. They create it themselves. Sometimes it is a seemingly small transaction, buying a cheap piece of land in a neglected area. And then years later, that area becomes a bustling center. Sometimes it is investing capital in an idea others dismissed. Then that idea explodes into a billion-dollar enterprise. Opportunity does not appear as a gift, but is born from a different perspective, and the courage to seize it. That creativity is not blind gambling. It is based on a solid foundation, financial knowledge, the ability to read cash flow, understanding the law, and above all, training and identifying what others overlook. The rich invent money by connecting pieces that others do not see as related. When the market falls into crisis, the majority shrinks back, cuts spending, and tries to stay safe. But precisely in that darkness, the rich find light, an asset being sold off, an undervalued stock, a small business starved for capital. All are opportunities. The difference lies only in the fact that one side trembles and the other sees potential. The rich father once said, "Money is created in the mind before it appears in the pocket." That statement seems abstract, but reflects reality. If the mind is only accustomed to seeking safety, it will only see old choices. If the mind is trained to identify opportunity, it will see cash flow where others only see deadlock. To do that, it is inevitable to face mistakes. Many people are wary of failure, but the rich view failure as tuition. Losing a sum of money in a transaction is not the end, but a lesson to identify opportunities faster and more accurately next time. This very attitude creates an ever-widening gap. One side is paralyzed by fear. The other uses failure to strengthen itself. In that journey, Patience is also an indispensable factor. Creativity does not always immediately turn into gold. Sometimes it takes many years of waiting. Sometimes it requires going through many rounds of testing. But for those who persevere, time becomes an ally and accumulation turns into power. The mindset of inventing money also extends to how daily work is viewed. Instead of asking how much this job pays, they ask what skills this job teaches them, what opportunities it opens up. In that way, every experience, every skill learned can become a tool in the future to create value. Money comes from the combination of knowledge, experience, and creativity. The key point of the entire lesson in this phase is the freedom of thought. The poor and middle class often think within a framework: work, earn a salary, buy a house, spend. The rich break that framework, viewing money as an energy flow that can be directed. When an opportunity rises, they do not ask if they have enough money, but ask how to make it happen. That question opens the path to finding investors, borrowing capital, collaborating, and even creating a new model. Money is not limited by what they currently have, but by the limits of imagination. This does not mean wishful dreaming, but daring to broaden the vision and then using knowledge to make it a reality. At this point, the picture has closed. From the story of the two children working for a meager salary to the lesson about fear and desire. From the concept of assets and liabilities to the power of the corporation. And finally, the truth that the rich create money. All intertwined into a unified message. Wealth does not come from working harder, but from thinking differently, learning to see and create opportunities. During the years of growing up, another principle was revealed: work to learn, not work for money. Most people are taught from a young age to seek stable jobs, prioritize high salaries, and solid benefits. But looking deeper, one can see that this very choice has turned them into dependents. The salary, while seemingly secure, is also the golden hoop that tightly binds them to the fear of losing their job. The difference of the truly rich lies in the way they regard work as a school. A job does not necessarily have to bring a large income, but must bring new skills. That could be skills in sales, negotiation, management, or even grasping human psychology. While others choose a safe position with a high salary, they choose a detour, entering an unfamiliar field just to train a necessary skill for the future. The person who has experienced this path once said, "One of the reasons many talented people are not rich is because they are too good in one area, but weak in other skills. An engineer might be excellent technically, but if he does not know how to sell the product, does not know how to manage finances, he will depend on the business owner for life. A doctor might be professionally skilled, but if lacking understanding of administration or investment, he will only be an employee for the very system he serves." True value comes from the ability to connect skills. A person may not be the best expert in any field, but if they know enough about many essential skills, they can build an operating system for themselves. They can recognize opportunities, negotiate, manage a team, understand cash flow, and ultimately turn it all into real assets. This attitude runs counter to the majority. Ordinary people ask how much this job pays. The person learning the new principle asks what this job teaches. That question opens up a different path. A person might accept a low salary to learn sales because he knows the ability to sell will help him open a business. Another chooses to enter the finance field to understand how money operates, instead of being content in the learned profession. That choice requires courage because it often means a trade-off, skipping the safe job, stepping into a harsh environment, and facing the possibility of failure. But it is those very challenges that forge resilience, transforming theory into practical experience. Knowledge that is not validated by action is just a thin, easily peeling layer of paint. In this journey, sales skills are often considered the most important. Without the ability to persuade and communicate, every idea will die prematurely. Next is management skill, knowing how to coordinate people, resources, time, and of course, knowledge of accounting. Finance is the core. If one cannot read the numbers, they cannot read the flow of life either. The difference between a specialist and a multi-skilled learner gradually becomes clear. The specialist is good in a narrow segment, but the dependence makes it difficult for him to escape. Conversely, the person who diligently gathers skills from many experiences becomes the free person. Because he can operate, he can build, he can see the whole picture. Therefore, the principal work to learn is not just advice, but a warning. If we only work for money, we will miss the opportunity to learn new skills. And without skills, money will leave us quickly. The cycle of dependence will continue to tighten. Investing in oneself, in new skills, is the longest-lasting profitable investment. The keen observer will recognize that the history of successful people always bears this mark. They gradually pass through many different fields, picking up a piece of the puzzle at each place. When the pieces connect, the complete picture forms. From then on, they no longer ask who will hire me, but ask what will I build from everything I have learned. The answer lies in the change of perspective. Work is no longer the goal, but the tool. Salary is no longer the reward, but just the means. The destination is not advancement within an organization, but the freedom to operate life according to one's own rules of the game. To achieve that, the only path is to regard every job as a classroom, every difficulty as an exercise, and every failure as a tuition payment. While most people spend their lives honing one expertise, viewing it as a safety ticket, a few choose a different path. They move through many fields, accepting the price for unfamiliar experiences. The difference lies in the goal. The first person seeks stability, the second seeks freedom. Stability may seem like the wise choice, but it contains an invisible limitation. A master engineer can receive a high salary, but if the company closes, that skill is not enough to create his own system. A reputable lawyer can be highly valued, but if he lacks financial management knowledge, he can still fall into debt. These examples show that when a skill is placed in a single environment, people become slaves to that environment. Conversely, the person who takes the effort to train multiple skills will have a comprehensive view. Learning how to sell helps to understand customer psychology and the value of persuasion. Learning management helps coordinate people, creating a sustainable structure. Learning accounting and finance helps read the language of money, knowing where cash flow is going and where it needs to be directed. Learning investment helps turn money into a tool instead of just a goal. This combination is what opens the way to escape dependence. Someone once left a high-paying position to join a small sales company just to learn customer outreach. In the eyes of outsiders, that was a crazy decision. But a few years later, sales skills became the foundation for starting a business. Another chose to work in a bank, not out of love, but because he wanted to understand how the monetary system operates. That knowledge later helped him manage his own assets. Every step like that is an investment in oneself, even if it looks like a setback on the surface. The important thing lies in the perspective. Salary is only immediate, skills are long-term. When a skill is sufficiently honed, it can open countless paths. But when relying only on salary, any fluctuation is enough to erase the feeling of security. Yet, the majority of people still choose the opposite. They tightly attach themselves to their current job, afraid of losing the stable salary. That fear makes them refuse opportunities to learn and inadvertently locks the door to freedom. They forget that the high-paying job itself can disappear overnight, but a skill, once it belongs to them, will never be taken away. At a deeper level, this difference also creates different views on failure. The person who only cares about salary sees failure as the end. The person who works to learn sees failure as part of the tuition fee. The money lost in an unsuccessful venture is seen as a training cost, and the lesson learned is worth many times more. Investing in skills is an investment few are willing to pay for, but it is the only one that never results in a loss. That is why those who understand this principle can go through many small failures and still move forward, while the other person collapses after just one incident. At this point, a big question is raised. If knowing that learning new skills is more important than salary, why do the majority still not do it? Why do millions of people, even having heard this advice, continue to choose the old path? The answer lies in the internal obstacles within people, the fear of losing money, the habit of laziness, skepticism, arrogance, and bad spending habits, all combine to form a wall separating knowing and doing. Many people nod when they hear the lesson, but when they step into reality, they hesitate. The security of the current job seems much more comfortable than the worry of facing failure. Therefore, after emphasizing the work to learn mindset, the next lesson does not stop at knowledge, but delves into psychology, overcoming internal barriers. Because no one is poor from lack of opportunity, but poor from not daring to step out of the comfort zone. After the work to learn principle is emphasized, a new problem becomes clear. Why do many people understand but still not act? The answer lies in the internal barriers. It is not a lack of opportunity, nor a lack of knowledge, but fear and skepticism that tightly bind their steps. The fear of losing money is the first and strongest barrier. People are naturally more afraid of loss than they desire profit. When facing an opportunity, their first reaction is often to think about the prospect of failure. Just imagining the possibility of loss, they retreat. Therefore, opportunities quietly pass by, leaving a temporary sense of security, but also signifying long-term stagnation. The truth is no one has never lost money. Even the rich have experienced countless failures, but instead of letting failure bury them, they regard it as tuition. Losing money in an unsuccessful transaction is not the end, but a lesson to be more sharp next time. The rich are not better on the first try. They are just more persistent on subsequent ones. Conversely, the poor and middle class often associate small failures with great humiliation. They are ashamed to admit mistakes. They fear the eyes of others, and to avoid that, they choose not to participate. This choice keeps them in fragile security, but also means accepting a lifetime of limitation. Besides fear, skepticism is an equally subtle barrier. Skepticism often wears the cloak of reason, making people believe they are being sober. When they hear of an opportunity, they immediately think of every reason why it will not work. They compare, analyze, and cite a series of failed examples to reinforce the decision to do nothing. In reality, skepticism is often just another form of fear. Instead of admitting fear, people say they are being cautious. Instead of facing their deepest desires, they bury them under a layer of pessimistic reasoning. The result is that they are paralyzed, always seeing risks, but never opportunities. The rich father once pointed out, the skeptic will never be rich, because he is always right in proving that it is impossible. And indeed, if one only focuses on finding reasons not to start, people will always find dozens of pieces of evidence. The market is too dangerous, real estate is too risky, stocks are too volatile, starting a business is too adventurous. These statements may sound wise, but are actually handcuffs locking their hands. The difference lies in perspective. Successful people do not deny risk. They look straight at it, consider it, and then act. Failure may happen, but in failure, there is a lesson. The permanently failed person is the one who never dares to take a step. Fear and skepticism combine to create an invisible pair of shackles. One side makes people tremble at the prospect of loss. The other side makes them constantly procrastinate with the reason of not being ready. And while they hesitate, others who dare to act move forward, and the gap grows larger. The harsh truth is, opportunity waits for no one. A cheap piece of land, a profitable deal, a new trend, all can disappear after just a few days. The person who dares to step in, even if they fail, gains experience. The person standing on the sidelines, though safe, loses the opportunity and stays put. At this point, the necessary thing is not to eliminate fear or skepticism. What cannot disappear must be managed. Successful people learn to live with fear, but they do not let it take the wheel. They realize their heart still beats fast, sweat still breaks out, but their feet still move forward. That very choice is what determines destiny. And from here, the story opens up to other, equally subtle barriers: laziness, bad spending habits, and arrogance. These elements may seem small, but are powerful enough to ruin a lifetime of effort. After fear and skepticism, the next wall appears, named laziness. Laziness here is not about lying around all day doing nothing, but a subtle avoidance disguised by busyness. Many people bury themselves in work, attending one meeting after another, but in reality, they are only trying to avoid the most important issues. Busyness is the luxurious mask of laziness. When someone mentions managing finances or investing, they often say, "I'm too busy. I don't have time." That statement sounds reasonable, but it is actually a way of refusing to confront. Because if they truly wanted to, they would make time. Busyness is just an excuse not to touch the internal fear. As a result, they continue to run around the work wheel, comforting themselves that they are hardworking while their assets do not grow. Accompanying laziness is the habit of bad spending. Very many people are not poor from lack of income, but from spending habits. Whenever they have additional income, they immediately raise their standard of living. When the salary increases, the house is bigger, the car is fancier, the vacation is more expensive. The higher the income, the larger the liabilities swell. That is why many high-salaried people still live in debt, because the cash flow only goes out and does not return. The difference lies in the goal. The first person seeks stability, the second seeks freedom. Stability may seem like the wise choice, but it contains an invisible limitation. A master engineer can receive a high salary, but if the company closes, that skill is not enough to create a separate system. A reputable lawyer can be highly valued, but if he lacks financial management knowledge, he can still fall into debt. These examples show that when a skill is placed in a single environment, people become slaves to that environment. Conversely, the person who takes the effort to train multiple skills will have a comprehensive view. Learning sales helps to understand customer psychology and the value of persuasion. Learning administration helps coordinate people, creating a sustainable structure. Learning accounting and finance helps read the language of money, knowing where cash flow is going and where it needs to be directed. Learning investment helps turn money into a tool instead of just a goal. This combination is what opens the way to escape dependence. Someone once left a high-paying position to join a small sales company just to learn customer outreach. To outsiders, that was a crazy decision. But a few years later, sales skills became the foundation for starting a business. Another chose to work in a bank, not out of passion, but because he wanted to understand how the monetary system operates. That knowledge later helped him manage his own assets. Each step like that is an investment in oneself, even if it looks like a retreat on the surface. The important thing lies in the perspective. Salary is only temporary, skills are long-term. When a skill is sufficiently honed, it can open countless paths. But when relying only on salary, any fluctuation is enough to erase the feeling of security. Yet, the majority of people still choose the opposite. They tightly attach themselves to their current job, afraid of losing the stable salary. That fear makes them refuse opportunities to learn and inadvertently locks the door to freedom. They forget that the high-paying job itself can disappear overnight. But skills, once they belong to you, can never be taken away. At a deeper level, this difference also creates different views on failure. The person who only cares about salary sees failure as the end. The person who works to learn sees failure as part of the tuition fee. The money lost in an unsuccessful venture is seen as a training cost, and the lesson learned is many times more valuable. Investing in skills is an investment few are willing to pay, but it is the only one that never loses value. That is why those who understand this principle can go through many small failures and still move forward, while the other person collapses after just one incident. At this point, a big question is posed. If we know that learning new skills is more important than salary, why do the majority still not do it? Why do millions of people, despite hearing this advice, continue to choose the old path? The answer lies in the internal obstacles within people, the fear of losing money, the habit of laziness, skepticism, arrogance, and bad spending habits, all combine to form a wall between knowing and doing. Many people nod when they hear the lesson, but when they step out into reality, they hesitate. The security of the current job seems much more comfortable than the worry of facing failure. Therefore, after emphasizing the work to learn mindset, the next lesson does not stop at knowledge, but delves into psychology, overcoming internal barriers. Because no one is poor from a lack of opportunity, but poor from not daring to step out of the comfort zone. After the work to learn principle is emphasized, the new problem becomes clear. Why do many people understand but still not act? The answer lies in the internal barriers. It is not a lack of opportunity, nor a lack of knowledge, but fear and skepticism that tightly bind their steps. The fear of losing money is the first and strongest barrier. People are naturally more afraid of loss than they are eager for profit. When faced with an opportunity, their first reaction is often to think of the prospect of failure. Just imagining the possibility of loss, they withdraw. Therefore, opportunities quietly pass by, leaving a temporary sense of security, but also signifying long-term stagnation. The truth is that no one has never lost money. Even the rich have gone through countless failures, but instead of letting failure bury them, they see it as tuition. Losing money in a transaction is not the end, but a lesson to be sharper next time. The rich are not better on the first try. They are just more persistent on the subsequent ones. Conversely, the poor and middle class often associate small failures with great humiliation. They are ashamed to admit mistakes. They fear the gaze of others, and to avoid that, they choose not to participate. This choice keeps them in fragile security, but also means accepting a lifetime of limitation. Besides fear, skepticism is an equally subtle barrier. Skepticism often wears the cloak of reason, making people believe they are being sober. When they hear of an opportunity, they immediately think of every reason why it will not work. They compare, analyze, and cite a series of failed examples to reinforce the decision to do nothing. In fact, skepticism is often just another form of fear. Instead of admitting fear, people say they are being cautious. Instead of facing their deepest desires, they bury them under a layer of pessimistic reasoning. The result is that they are paralyzed, always seeing risks, but never opportunities. The rich father once pointed out, the skeptic will never be rich, because he is always right in proving that it is impossible. And indeed, if one only focuses on finding reasons not to start, people will always find dozens of pieces of evidence. The market is too dangerous, real estate is too risky, stocks are too volatile, starting a business is too adventurous. These statements may sound wise, but are actually handcuffs locking their hands. The difference lies in perspective. Successful people do not deny risk. They look straight at it, consider it, and then act. Failure may occur, but in failure, there is a lesson. The permanently failed person is the one who never dares to take a step. Fear and skepticism combine to create an invisible pair of shackles. One side makes people tremble at the prospect of loss. The other side makes them constantly procrastinate with the reason of not being ready. And while they hesitate, others who dare to act move forward, and the gap grows wider. The harsh truth is, opportunity waits for no one. A cheap piece of land, a profitable deal, a new trend, all can disappear after just a few days. The person who dares to step in, even if they fail, gains experience. The person standing on the sidelines, though safe, loses the opportunity and stays put. At this point, the necessary thing is not to eliminate fear or skepticism. What cannot disappear must be managed. Successful people learn to live with fear, but they do not let it take the steering wheel. They realize their heart still beats fast, sweat still breaks out, but their feet still move forward. That very choice is what determines destiny. And from here, the story opens up to other, equally subtle barriers: laziness, bad spending habits, and arrogance. These elements may seem small, but are powerful enough to ruin a lifetime of effort. After fear and skepticism, the next wall appears, named laziness. Laziness here is not about lying around all day doing nothing, but a subtle avoidance disguised by busyness. Many people bury themselves in work, attending one meeting after another, but in reality, they are only trying to avoid the most important issues. Busyness is the luxurious mask of laziness. When someone mentions managing finances or investing, they often say, "I'm too busy. I don't have time." That statement sounds reasonable, but it is actually a way of refusing to confront, because if they truly wanted to, they would make time. Busyness is just an excuse not to touch the internal fear. As a result, they continue to run around the work wheel, comforting themselves that they are hardworking while their assets do not grow. Accompanying laziness is the habit of bad spending. Very many people are not poor from lack of income, but from spending habits. Whenever they have additional income, they immediately raise their standard of living. When the salary increases, the house is bigger, the car is fancier, the vacation is more expensive. The higher the income, the larger the liabilities swell. That is why many high-salaried people still live in debt, because the cash flow only goes out and does not return. The rich father once mentioned the principle of pay yourself first. This means before paying bills or spending, set aside a fixed portion for saving and investing. This principle creates mandatory discipline, forcing oneself to find ways to work more efficiently to compensate for the shortfall. By putting oneself first, people are forced to be smarter with money. Conversely, when prioritizing spending, they only reinforce the habit of living paycheck to paycheck. The next barrier is arrogance. Many people fail not because they don't know, but because they believe they know everything. Arrogance causes them to reject advice, ignore the experience of those who came before them, and refuse to admit mistakes. Arrogance also causes them to stop learning, because learning requires humility. When people think they are good enough, they officially stop growing financially. Arrogance can be very costly. Investment decisions based on blind confidence easily lead to heavy losses. The refusal to listen makes them repeat old mistakes, and the reluctance to admit them means they never learn from failure. Looking at these barriers holistically, fear, skepticism, laziness, bad habits, and arrogance do not exist separately. They link together into a network, holding people tight in a vicious cycle. To break free, one does not need to eliminate them completely, but needs to identify and manage them. No one can be completely fearless, completely unskeptical, or completely inarrogant, but those who know how to control them are the ones who advance. Here, an important principle emerges: treat failure as tuition. Instead of avoiding it, to never lose money, accept losing a small amount to learn a big lesson. Like paying tuition to attend school, People need to pay tuition to real life. That money is not lost in vain. It becomes valuable experience for subsequent attempts. It is this change in attitude towards failure that makes the difference. Those who fear losing money see failure as the end, while the courageous see it as a new beginning. In finances and life, no success comes from absolute safety. After the barriers are pointed out, the next question naturally arises: if one understands that one must learn, and if one has identified the barriers, how does one start? Not everyone has a ready foundation or capital, but anyone can begin the journey with small but persistent steps. Once it is understood that the path to financial freedom requires knowledge, skills, and the perseverance to overcome barriers, the most natural question remains where to start. The majority of people stop at this point. They nod at the theory, agree with the importance of assets, but when it comes to action, they are confused. Therefore, a series of principles are given to shape the beginning. First, a reason big enough is needed. Without deep motivation, every effort will quickly fade. Money alone is not enough to make someone persistent. But if the goal is tied to a deep desire to escape the cycle their parents went through, to be free to live their own life, to give their children a different future, then the strength will be completely different. When the reason is big enough, the fear shrinks. Next is the principle of pay yourself first. Most people receive a salary and immediately spend it on bills, needs, and consumption. Only when there's surplus do they think of saving or investing. But that order needs to be reversed. As soon as income is received, set aside a fixed portion for saving and investing, treating it as untouchable. This action forces people to be creative in managing the rest. The pressure of scarcity becomes the driving force for wisdom. Many people object, arguing that this easily leads to debt. But it is that very tension that forces people to find ways to increase efficiency, raise income, and reduce unnecessary spending. Instead of living comfortably on a sufficient salary, they are forced to break out. As a result, the asset column grows, while financial discipline also becomes solid. Another factor less mentioned, but extremely important: choose companions and mentors. The financial world is not a solitary game. A good broker, an experienced consultant, a learning community all can shorten the path. Instead of fumbling alone, learn from those who have gone before. The humility to seek out those who are better is a wise step, distinctly different from the arrogance mentioned earlier. Along with that is the principle of starting small but consistently. Many people assume they need a large amount of capital to start, so they keep waiting until they have enough. But in reality, consistency is more important than size. A small investment made continuously will accumulate into a solid asset column. Meanwhile, those who wait for the perfect opportunity often never start. It is also necessary to understand that starting does not mean absolute safety. There will be mistakes, there will be failed investments, but it is those small, controlled steps that allow us to learn without being defeated. Every small mistake is a brick contributing to building a solid wall. Besides the principles, there are softer lessons. For example, knowing how to value brokers. Instead of scoffing at them earning commissions, a good broker brings opportunities, saves time, and sometimes even the wisdom of many years of experience. Knowing how to build relationships with them is knowing how to open more doors for oneself. At a deeper level, starting is also about training one's perspective every day. Develop the habit of observing where the opportunities are, where the signs of cash flow are. Read the newspaper not just for entertainment, but to find clues. Walking down a street not just to look at stores, but to contemplate land value. Opportunity is always around us. The only question is whether we train our eyes to recognize it. These starting steps, if maintained, will turn into habits, and habits create destiny. The difference between ordinary people and the financially free is not in a great leap, but in small actions repeated consistently over many years. By now, the starting picture is clear enough, but to turn it all into reality, a more specific layer of action is still needed. Clearly listed things, so that no one can make excuses for procrastination anymore. After the starting principles, what is missing is a clear checklist so that anyone can take action, instead of just stopping at understanding. These suggestions are not abstract theories, but steps that can be taken every day to build financial freedom little by little. First, stop ineffective old habits. Most people live in inertia, spending money first, saving later, waiting for the perfect opportunity instead of trying something small, making excuses about being busy to avoid change. It is necessary to strongly cut off those patterns. Only by creating space can the new enter. The next step is to actively hunt for opportunities. Opportunities do not fall from the sky. They must be sought. Reading newspapers, attending seminars, surveying the market, talking to people in the field. All are ways to train one's vision. Instead of letting information pass by, practice the habit of asking, what opportunity does this open up? Along with that, learning from those who came before is the shortest path. Instead of paying the price for every mistake yourself, observe successful people, join classes, discussion groups, and find a mentor. Not to find a shortcut, but to avoid unnecessary detours. Humbly asking questions is often more valuable than arrogantly asserting. Another equally important action, make many offers. In investment as well as in business, an opportunity only becomes real when you step out and make an offer. Most people are hesitant, afraid of being rejected, afraid of revealing their lack of experience. But the more offers are made, the greater the chance of achieving a successful deal. This very proactiveness turns ideas into action, turns opportunities into assets. Hand in hand with action is cultivating the discipline of monitoring cash flow. Make it a monthly habit to record income and expenses, evaluate assets, and analyze opportunities. If not monitored, people easily delude themselves into thinking they are progressing, when in reality they are just standing still. Numbers do not lie, and they are the most honest mirror of financial progress. Besides that, turn learning into a fixed routine. Do not read one book and stop. Do not attend one course and quit, but maintain consistency. One article every week, one book every month, one experience sharing session every quarter. This accumulation over time will turn into a competitive advantage that no one can take away. All these actions, when viewed individually, may seem small, but when combined, they become a system, stopping old habits to make room for new ones, hunting for opportunities to train one's vision, learning from those who came before to avoid waste, making many offers to take action, monitoring cash flow for verification, and learning regularly for accumulation. Each small step is a brick, and the house of financial freedom is built from thousands of such bricks, starting with the thought work to learn, not work to earn, passing through the wall of fear, skepticism, laziness, bad habits, and arrogance, then leading to the initial principles and specific actions. The consistent message is that financial freedom is not a dream, but the result of continuous learning and persistent action. However, the journey does not stop here. After knowing how to start, the next question is how to sustain, how to continue when the road is full of thorns. That is when we move to the final reflections, where the entire lesson is strung together into the big picture, not just about money, but also about how to live a life with freedom and meaning. Going through the entire course of the book, perhaps the clearest remainder is not a formula, but a new way of seeing. The pages force us to confront the familiar paradox: the more highly educated and the more money people earn, the easier it is for them to get stuck in debt. Meanwhile, those without prestigious degrees build freedom through shrewdness and the ability to read and understand the money game. The biggest lesson lies here. It is not income that determines wealth, but how we manage and direct cash flow. Assets and liabilities, to seemingly simple concepts, become the boundary between freedom and dependence. Many people spend their lives nurturing liabilities, while the key is to persistently accumulate assets, however small. Another lesson: fear and desire are the powerful engines, but also to dangerous traps. The fear of not having money makes people resign themselves to the endless treadmill. The desire for more makes them willing to tighten that cycle. Escaping does not mean eliminating emotions, but learning how to see through and control them. The book also points out that financial freedom does not come from chasing a salary, but from working to learn new skills. From sales, management to reading cash flow is the true capital. Every job, every experience, every failure can become a classroom. Those who regard it as useless cost will forever be stuck. Those who regard it as tuition will progress step by step. More important than anything is action, stopping old habits, cultivating the discipline of paying yourself first, proactively seeking opportunities, humbly learning from those who came before, and patiently building asset bricks one by one. Financial freedom does not blossom from a single great leap, but from small seeds sown continuously over the years. But then, the remaining question for each listener is, what do you truly want from money? Do you want more to spend or enough to have choices? Do you want security in the loop or uncertainty, but but with the possibility of freedom? Do you want to live like the majority or dare to go against it to find your own way? These questions do not have a single answer and perhaps do not need an immediate reply. Their value lies in forcing us to stop, reflect, and decide our own path. The book has fulfilled its role, sowing the seeds of skepticism and desire. The rest belongs to each individual. Thank you for listening. And now, the book vibe says goodbye and see you again.